In today's episode on the Fact Hunter channel, we will tell the story of the war that the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain called the Strange War, and for the Germans it was simply the Sitzkrieg sitting war. Surprised Allied generals, US Senator William Borah spoke of a war of convenience. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain called it a strange war. For the Germans it was the Sitzkrieg, sitting war. Ever since Adolf Hitler's mighty war machine crushed Poland in September 1939, the British and French behind the Maginot Line and the Wehrmacht soldiers behind the Siegfried Line had been wasting time trying not to shoot at each other. Newspaper publishers in Britain and the United States looked to the future through rose-colored glasses. The strange war, they wrote, would soon end on its own, while all the veterans would return home and there would be no more loss of life or destruction of property. As if in spite of this mood of widespread optimism, on January 10, 1940, a small plane flying along the Belgian border suffered an engine malfunction and had to make an emergency landing. The plane's wings fell off as it crashed among the trees. Several Belgian soldiers rushed over from a nearby border guard post to render aid to the crash victims. 2 men aboard the plane survived the forced landing. Although they were wearing civilian clothes, both were German army officers. Neither of them suffered serious injuries. The 2 Germans, the pilot and 32-year-old Major Helmuth Rheinberger, were escorted to the nearby Belgian army headquarters, where they demanded to be allowed to contact the ambassador or German military attaché in neutral Belgium by telephone. The guardhouse at the command headquarters was heated by a small but very hot belly stove. Sitting in a chair, Major Rheinberger seemed to be snoozing. At the other end of the room, 2 Belgian soldiers were resting. Suddenly Rheinberger sprang to his feet and reached the stove. He opened the door, steaming painfully in his hand, and hurled into the fire a bundle of papers, hitherto hidden under a long grey coat. At that moment, Captain Emilio Rodriguez, the Belgian section commander, entered the room to question the Germans. He ran to the stove, put his hand in it and pulled out the papers, which were already engulfed in a bright flame. He too was severely burned. Rheinberger wordlessly threw himself at the Belgian captain, trying to snatch the revolver from him. Both men fell and rolled on the floor. Other Belgian soldiers came running. With their help, they managed to overpower the German officer. "I am finished," declared Rheinberger. "I did the unforgivable thing, and that is why I needed your revolver. I did not want to kill you, but to kill myself." Although Rheinberger's papers were partially consumed by fire, Belgian intelligence put together the surviving fragments and managed to read the heading, General Operational Order. The beginning of the order read, "The German army will launch an offensive on the front between the North Sea and the Moselle." It continued with phrases such as Festung Holland, Fortress Holland, 7th Fliegerkorps, 7th Air Corps, and Panzer Group, Armored Grouping. The Belgian generals couldn't believe their eyes. It was an almost complete operational Plan Yellow for the German invasion of France and the Netherlands. Had Rheinberger's papers been deliberately crafted to mislead the Western Allies? Belgian intelligence was determined to find the answer to this question. When Major General Werner Veninger, the German military attaché in Brussels, asked permission to speak with Major Rheinberger, he was immediately granted permission. The 2 Germans were placed in a separate room where they could talk without witnesses. However, the Belgians, unbeknownst to the Wehrmacht officers, had set up a wiretap in the room. Sitting in an adjacent room, the electronic eavesdropping specialists heard Rheinberger explain to the general that he had managed to burn the operational orders pertaining to the Yellow Plan in their entirety, which was an outright lie, but a nervous Weninger accepted it with evident relief. This assurance by the courier convinced the Belgians that the documents were authentic, uncorrected. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler did not believe Rheinberger's story and flew into a wild rage. "It was the greatest outburst of anger I have ever experienced," General Wilhelm Keitel later confessed. The Führer raged with rage, foam came up to his lips, slammed his fists against the wall, and hurled insults at the idiots and traitors on the general staff, threatening them with a court-martial for having led the enemy to learn of his plans for future conquests in the West. Hitler and his generals assumed that the Yellow Plan would be delivered to the Allied High Command. However, when German intelligence reported that there were no changes in the deployment of British and French units, the Führer ordered the plan to be put into effect with only minor adjustments. In the early months of 1940, the Allies obtained many other pieces of evidence, indicating that Hitler intended to launch a decisive offensive in the West. On January 12, 1940, in Rome, Piedmonte's Princess Marie-José, wife of the Italian heir to the throne, paid a visit to Count Ciano, son-in-law of dictator Benito Mussolini and Italian foreign minister. Galeazzo Ciano, a tall, handsome man in secret sincerely hated the Nazi sheikh. He detested Hermann Göring and SS Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler in particular. Princess Marie-José, almost with tears in her eyes, expressed to him her fears that the German army would invade Belgium, her native country, any minute. That evening, Count Ciano wrote in his diary, "I told her that in the light of our latest information it seems highly probable she will undoubtedly notify Belgian King Leopold." Ciano thus made a significant effort to stick a stick in the spokes of the Nazi sheikh war machine. In the weeks leading up to the invasion, converted spies working for the French stole documents that pinpointed the goals of Plan Yellow. French and British air reconnaissance reported a heavy concentration of German troops and armored units right on the Reich's border. And, most importantly, Ultra, the top-secret British listening service, intercepted and deciphered hundreds of Wehrmacht radiograms, which indicated that the Yellow Plan was ready for immediate implementation. On April 30, 1940, Dr. Joseph Müller, a prominent lawyer from Munich, got off a Lufthansa cruise plane at Rome Airport and took a cab to his hotel. Müller, a practicing Catholic, was carrying out the most important mission of his life. He was trying to warn the British and French that Hitler intended to put the Yellow Plan into effect. Dr. Müller was a member of the Schwarzkapelle, Black Orchestra, a deeply conspiratorial organization of influential German officers and senior government officials who set themselves the goal of removing the Führer one way or another. The conspirators were convinced that Hitler was recklessly leading the fatherland toward total annihilation. Müller was chosen for this extremely important mission because he had numerous contacts in the Vatican and enjoyed the sympathy of Pope Pius XII. The lawyer's friends in the Holy See also included Father Robert Leiber, a Jesuit priest who was a confidant of the Pope. During a previous trip to Rome in October 1939, Müller met secretly with the Pope, who agreed to act as an intermediary between the Schwarzkapelle and the British government. The Pope's liaison would be Darcy Osborne, Britain's ambassador to the Vatican. The Pope stressed that his goal was peace, based on assurances from France and England that they would not take advantage of internal disturbances that might occur after the removal of Adolf Hitler to attack and occupy Germany. Neither the British nor the French government had any desire to make such concessions. Eternal, Joseph Müller felt remorse about his assignment. He considered himself a loyal German. If his mission had succeeded, and the preempted British and French armies had thwarted the Yellow Plan, how many young Germans would have died because of him? Müller carried with him a carefully edited statement that the Schwarzkapelle leaders had written before his departure. In it they stated that Hitler was preparing to strike in the West, and that this would happen soon. Müller handed the statement to his old friend Father Leiber, and the latter, it is to be presumed, passed it on to the Pope and Ambassador Osborne. Father Leiber then rushed to inform his former schoolmate, Jesuit priest Theodor Monens, of everything, and Reverend Monens in turn carried the disturbing news to Adrian Nieuwenhuis, the Belgian ambassador to Rome. Nieuwenhuis did not believe it at first, but changed his mind a few days later, when Abbot Hubert Nuyts, a Belgian who was the general of the Premonstratensian order, informed him that the Wehrmacht would soon attack the Netherlands and France, using tanks, infantry, paratroopers and aircraft. Ambassador Nieuwenhuis became seriously concerned, and immediately warned the government in Brussels. It was May 2, 1940. A week later, on the evening of May 9th, Colonel Hans Oster, deputy head of the Abwehr, and his old friend, Dutch military attaché Major Gisbertus S.A.'s, were having dinner together at Oster's house on the outskirts of darkened Berlin. Oster, long a member of the Schwarzkapelle, was depressed and angry at the same time. He bitterly told Major S.A.'s that a little earlier that afternoon, the Führer had irrevocably ordered the Yellow Plan to proceed. At this point, 2,500,000 troops, formed into 102 divisions, including 9 armored and 6 motorized divisions, were waiting in readiness along the French, Belgian and Dutch borders. The assault was to begin at 3:30 a.m. the next morning, May 10, 1940. After dinner, Colonel Oster went to the German High Command to see if there had been a change of plans. There was not. Final preparations for the attack were underway. Returning home, Oster announced to S.A.'s, "That pig has gone to the Western Front." The pig was Adolf Hitler. S.A.'s telephoned the Belgian military attaché in Berlin and then went hurriedly to his own embassy. He ordered an interview with Dutch headquarters in The Hague and, using a pre-arranged cipher, warned his superiors, "Tomorrow at dawn, stay tuned." A few hours after Major S.A.'s relayed the warning, a column of blacked-out vehicles pulled up in front of a large concrete bunker located at the top of a dense forest-covered hill south of Aachen. It was reaching 3 a.m. on Y-Day, the day of the attack. The bunker, code-named Felsennest, Eagle's Nest, was to serve Adolf Hitler as a command post in the offensive that was just beginning. Just 30 minutes after the Nazi God of War arrived, swarms of howling Stukas began bombing targets in neutral Belgium and the Netherlands. 2 hours later, German infantry and tanks crossed the border. Despite the overwhelming number of warning signals, mostly coming from the highest circles in the enemy camp, the Allied generals were taken completely by surprise. Even the Führer's commanders were amazed at the speed and magnitude of their own victories. At the end, in the incredibly short time of 6 weeks, the advancing Wehrmacht conquered France, Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands, and drove the British Expeditionary Corps from the continent. Almost all English tanks, cannons, cars and ammunition supplies were left on the beaches near Dunkirk. The question of why the Allied High Command, which was paralyzed by the German invasion, was so unprepared to defend itself remains one of the most impenetrable mysteries of the war.